Welcome back, dear listener, to another gentle journey through the natural world. Tonight, we're going to explore one of nature's most delicate and enchanting creations, flowers. Those soft petals that catch the morning dew, those vibrant colors that dot meadows and gardens, those subtle fragrances that drift on summer breezes. These aren't just beautiful decorations in our world, they're intricate living systems, each one a small miracle of evolution, adaptation, and survival. So find your most comfortable position, let your shoulders drop away from your ears, and allow your breathing to settle into its natural rhythm. Tonight's journey will take us through 100 fascinating facts about flowers, from the tiniest blooms smaller than a grain of rice to massive blossoms large enough for a child to sit inside. We'll discover flowers that bloom only at night, flowers that can poison or heal, flowers that have existed for millions of years, and flowers that are adapting to our changing world right now. Before we drift deeper into this floral world, I'm curious to know where you're listening from tonight. Are you tucked into bed in a quiet suburb, perhaps with a garden outside your window? Or are you in a bustling city seeking nature's peace through these words? Wherever you are in this wide world, you're part of our growing community of nature lovers, and I'm grateful you're here. Now, let's begin our peaceful exploration. Rakir, the ancient story of flowers. Our story begins not in a garden, but deep in time, over 140 million years ago. The first flowers that we would recognize as such appeared during the Cretaceous period, when dinosaurs still walked the earth. These early blooms were simple structures, nothing like the elaborate roses or orchids we see today. But they represented something revolutionary in the plant kingdom. For scientists, the sudden appearance of flowering plants in the fossil record was so puzzling that Charles Darwin himself called it an abominable mystery. One day, geologically speaking, there were no flowers. And then, seemingly overnight in evolutionary terms, they burst onto the scene in remarkable diversity. This rapid appearance has fascinated botanists for generations. The oldest flower fossils definitively identified as angiosperms, the flowering plants, date back approximately 130 to 140 million years. But recent discoveries keep pushing this date back further. In 2018, researchers in China discovered what may be one of the oldest flower fossils ever found, a plant called Nanjinganthus dendrostyla, dating back more than 174 million years to the Jurassic period. These ancient flowers looked quite different from what we see today. The first flower in Earth's history probably resembled something like a magnolia, with both male and female parts in a single bisexual bloom. It was a simple but effective design that set the stage for the incredible diversity of flowers we see today. Over millions of years, flowers evolved alongside insects, birds, and other animals in a beautiful dance of coevolution. Each species shaped the other. Flowers developed bright colors, sweet nectar, and alluring scents to attract pollinators. In return, pollinators developed specialized body parts to access that nectar, inadvertently carrying pollen from flower to flower as they went about their business. This partnership between flowers and pollinators is one of nature's most successful collaborations. Today, there are approximately 300,000 species of flowering plants on Earth, making them the most diverse group of land plants in existence. L'Ursarar, the architecture of a flower. Let's pause for a moment and examine the intricate structure of a single flower. Even the simplest bloom is a masterpiece of biological engineering, with each part playing a crucial role in the plant's reproduction. At the base of most flowers, you'll find the sepals. These are often green and leaf like, forming a protective covering around the developing bud. They're the flower's first line of defense, shielding the delicate reproductive parts inside from weather, insects, and other potential harm. Once the flower opens, sepals often remain at the base, supporting the bloom from below. The sepals together form what botanists call the calyx, creating a cup-like structure at the flower's foundation. In some flowers, like fuchsias, the sepals are just as colorful and showy as the petals themselves, adding to the flower's ornamental appeal. In others, such as poppies, the sepals fall away as soon as the flower opens, their protective job complete. The number of sepals varies greatly. Most dicots have 4 or 5 sepals, while monocots typically have 3 or multiples of 3. This numerical pattern is one of the ways botanists can classify plants into their respective families. Beneath the sepals lies the receptacle, a thickened portion of the flower stalk where all the floral parts attach. Think of it as the flower's foundation, the platform upon which everything else is built. In some flowers, like strawberries, the receptacle becomes part of the fruit we eat. That juicy red part of a strawberry isn't technically the fruit at all. It's the swollen receptacle. And the actual fruits are those tiny seed-like structures dotting its surface. Moving inward, we encounter the petals, collectively called the corolla. These are what most people think of when they picture a flower. Petals are the flower's advertisement. Their colors and patterns specifically designed to attract pollinators. Some petals have special markings called nectar guides, patterns that are invisible to human eyes but stand out brilliantly in ultraviolet light, which many insects can see. These guides act like runway lights, directing bees and butterflies straight to the flower's center, where the nectar awaits. The texture of petals varies remarkably from species to species. Rose petals feel soft and velvety, almost like fine fabric. Poppy petals are paper thin and delicate, with a texture like crepe paper. Iris petals can be smooth and waxy, while geranium petals have a subtle, almost imperceptible fuzziness. These textural differences aren't just random. They serve purposes related to water management, temperature regulation, and even how pollinators grip the flower while feeding. The shape of petals is equally diverse and purposeful. Tubular petals, like those of honeysuckle or trumpet vine, create a long corridor that only pollinators with the right tongue length can access. This exclusivity ensures that only certain species visit the flower, making pollination more efficient. Flat, landing pad petals, like those of sunflowers or daisies, provide a stable platform for insects to rest while they work. Reflexed petals, which curve backward like those of Turk's cap lilies, help protect the flower's center from rain while still allowing pollinators to access it. Petal arrangement follows mathematical precision in many flowers. The spiral pattern of rose petals, the radial symmetry of morning glories, the bilateral symmetry of orchids and snapdragons. Each follows principles that maximize the flower's effectiveness while using materials efficiently. Nature is both artist and engineer, creating beauty that serves function. At the heart of the flower lie the reproductive organs, The male parts, called stamens, consist of a thin stalk called a filament topped by an anther. The anther is where pollen is produced, those tiny grains that contain the male genetic material. Each anther can produce thousands or even millions of pollen grains, each one a microscopic package of genetic information. If you could look at pollen under a microscope, you'd see an astonishing variety of forms. Some pollen grains are perfectly round and smooth. Others are covered in the spikes, ridges, or intricate geometric patterns. Some have pores or furrows that allow the pollen tube to emerge during fertilization. The shapes are so distinctive that forensic scientists can identify plant species from pollen samples, and archaeologists use fossilized pollen to understand what plants grew in ancient landscapes. Each pollen grain is encased in one of the toughest biological materials known, which is why pollen can survive for millions of years in the fossil record. The number of stamens varies dramatically between species. A buttercup might have just 5 stamens, while a water lily can have several hundred. Some flowers arrange their stamens in neat rings around the center, while others position them in complex spirals. The length of the filaments matters too. In some flowers, the stamens are tucked deep inside, forcing pollinators to brush against them. In others, they extend far beyond the petals, their anthers dangling in the breeze, to release pollen into the air for wind pollination. The female part of the flower is the pistil, sometimes called the carpel. This structure typically has 3 parts: the stigma at the top, which is sticky to catch pollen grains; the style, a slender tube that connects the stigma to the ovary; and the ovary itself at the base, which contains the ovules. When a pollen grain lands on the stigma, it grows a tiny tube down through the style to reach the ovules, delivering the male genetic material to create seeds. The stigma's stickiness is no accident. It might be coated with sugars, proteins, or oils that help pollen grains adhere. Some stigmas are feathery or branched to increase surface area for catching pollen. Others are deeply lobed or have multiple surfaces. The stigma must also be able to recognize pollen from the right species while rejecting pollen from other plants. A chemical conversation happening at a cellular level that we're only beginning to understand. The style can be short and stout, or long and elegant. In some flowers, it's barely visible, while in others, like crocuses, the style extends dramatically from the center of the flower, creating a striking visual element. The length and shape of the style often correspond to the bodies of the flower's specific pollinators, ensuring that when the right creature visits, pollen is deposited exactly where it needs to be. Inside the ovary, nestled safely at the base of the pistil, are the ovules. These contain the female genetic material, the egg cells waiting for fertilization. The number of ovules varies. A tomato flower might have dozens of ovules in its ovary, and each one that gets fertilized will become a seed inside the tomato fruit. An apple blossom typically has 5 ovules, which is why we often find 5 seeds in an apple core. An avocado flower has just 1 ovule, producing that single large seed we're familiar with. Some flowers have all of these parts in one bloom. These are called perfect flowers or bisexual flowers because they contain both male and female reproductive structures. Roses, lilies, and tulips are examples of perfect flowers. Other plants have separate male and female flowers, called imperfect flowers. Squash and cucumber plants, for instance, produce two different types of flowers on the same plant. And then there are dioecious plants, where entire plants are either male or female. Holly trees are a good example. Only female holly trees produce those beautiful red berries, and only if there's a male holly nearby to provide pollen. This diversity in flower structure shows us that there's no single right way for a flower to be. Evolution has found countless solutions to the same problem: how to move pollen from one plant to another to create the next generation. The spectrum of flower colors, the colors of flowers, are one of their most captivating features, a visual symphony that has inspired artists, poets, and gardeners for millennia. But these colors aren't just beautiful, they're carefully evolved tools for survival. Red flowers are among the most dramatic in nature. They symbolize passion, love, and desire in human culture. But for flowers, red serves a more practical purpose. Red blooms are particularly attractive to birds, especially hummingbirds, whose vision is well tuned to spot red in the landscape. Interestingly, most bees cannot see red very well. It appears dark to them, almost black. This means that red flowers like cardinal flowers and trumpet vines are specifically advertising to bird pollinators, not insect ones. Orange flowers radiate warmth and energy. They attract a mix of pollinators, including butterflies and some bee species. The bright orange of marigolds, California poppies, and tiger lilies stands out beautifully against green foliage, making them easy for pollinators to locate from a distance. Yellow flowers bring sunshine wherever they bloom, from cheerful daisies to towering sunflowers. Yellow blooms are highly visible to most pollinators. Yellow is especially attractive to bees, which see this color very clearly. Buttercups, dandelions, and forsythia all use this golden hue to draw in their pollinating partners. White flowers have a purity and elegance all their own. They're often the most fragrant flowers because white blooms frequently rely on scent rather than color to attract pollinators. Many white flowers are pollinated by moths and bats, creatures that are active at night when color is less visible, but scent can carry far on the evening air. White flowers also reflect moonlight beautifully, making them easier for nocturnal pollinators to find. Blue flowers are relatively rare in nature, which makes them especially prized by gardeners. True blue pigments are difficult for plants to produce, requiring specific chemical compounds and soil conditions. Morning glories, delphiniums, and forget-me-nots manage to achieve these cool, calming hues. Blue flowers tend to attract bees, which can see blue wavelengths extremely well. Purple and lavender flowers represent a blend of red and blue pigments. These colors are associated with royalty and luxury in human culture, and in nature, they attract a wide variety of pollinators. Lavender, sage, and purple coneflowers are beloved by both bees and butterflies. Pink flowers offer gentleness and grace, from soft blush roses to vibrant pink petunias. These blooms attract many different pollinators. Pink is created when red pigments are diluted or combined with white areas of the petal. Green flowers are among the rarest and most unusual. Bells of Ireland, green spider chrysanthemums, and certain orchids produce blooms in shades of green. These flowers often rely more on scent than color to attract pollinators, or they may be wind pollinated and not need to attract animal pollinators at all. The colors of flowers come from pigments in the petals. The most common pigments are carotenoids, which produce yellow, orange, and red colors, and anthocyanins, which create red, purple, and blue hues. The exact shade depends on the pH of the cell sap in the petals. Acidic conditions tend to produce red anthocyanins, while alkaline conditions shift the color toward blue. Fascinatingly, some flowers can change color based on their environment. Hydrangeas are famous for this. In acidic soil, they bloom blue, while in alkaline soil, they turn pink. This happens because the aluminum in the soil, which the plants can only absorb when the soil is acidic, changes the color of the anthocyanin pigments in the petals. Recent research has revealed that flower colors are even changing in response to climate change. As temperatures rise and ozone levels fluctuate, flowers are adjusting the ultraviolet pigments in their petals. These UV patterns are invisible to human eyes, but crucial for attracting pollinators. Some flowers are increasing their UV absorbing pigments as a kind of sunscreen for their pollen, while others are decreasing these pigments to prevent overheating. These subtle changes could affect how attractive flowers are to their pollinators, with potentially significant consequences for both plants and the animals that depend on them. The magic of pollination. Pollination is one of nature's most essential processes, a partnership between flowers and the creatures that visit them. Without pollination, there would be no seeds, no fruits, no next generation of flowering plants. And without flowers, many animals would have no food. Bees are the most famous pollinators, and deservedly so. There are approximately 20,000 species of bees worldwide, and about 3,600 species live in the United States and Canada alone. These industrious insects are responsible for pollinating a huge portion of the world's flowering plants and agricultural crops. Honeybees often get the most attention, but they're actually just one species among many thousands of bee species, and they're not even native to North America. They were brought from Europe by colonists. Honeybees live in complex social colonies that can contain 50,000 or more individuals. Each colony has a single queen, thousands of female workers, and during breeding season, male drones. The worker bees are the ones we see visiting flowers. A single worker bee might visit several thousand flowers in a single day, working tirelessly from dawn until dusk during the blooming season. As she moves from flower to flower, pollen clings to the branched hairs covering her body. She deliberately grooms this pollen into special baskets on her hind legs called corbiculae, packing it into golden pellets to carry back to the hive. What's remarkable is that honeybees exhibit something called flower constancy. When a worker bee finds a good patch of flowers, she tends to visit only that species during that foraging trip. She doesn't hop randomly between roses, then daisies, then lavender. Instead, she works methodically through all the lavender before returning to the hive. This behavior makes honeybees extremely efficient pollinators because they're transferring pollen between flowers of the same species, which is exactly what needs to happen for fertilization. Native bees are incredibly diverse. There are tiny sweat bees, barely larger than a grain of rice, fuzzy bumblebees as large as your thumb, metallic green orchid bees, and solitary bees that nest in hollow stems or dig burrows in the ground. Each species has its own preferences for flowers, flying times, and nesting habits. Mason bees, for instance, are solitary bees that nest in a hollow plant stems or holes in wood. Each female builds her own nest without help from others. She collects pollen and nectar, mixing them into a paste, then lays a single egg on the food mass and seals the chamber with mud before starting the next chamber. These bees are such efficient pollinators that just a few hundred mason bees can pollinate an entire orchard. They're also gentle and rarely sting, making them favorites among gardeners. Carpenter bees are large, robust bees that excavate nesting tunnels in wood. Despite their intimidating size, the females rarely sting unless directly threatened. Male carpenter bees, which are often seen hovering territorially near their nests, can't sting at all. These bees are important pollinators of passion flowers, mountain laurel, and many other plants with large, sturdy flowers. Leaf cutter bees do exactly what their name suggests. They cut circular or oval pieces from leaves or flower petals, using the pieces to construct cylindrical cells in their nests. If you've ever noticed perfect circular notches cut from rose leaves or redbud foliage, a leafcutter bee was probably responsible. These bees are excellent pollinators of alfalfa and many garden vegetables. Mining bees dig elaborate burrow systems in bare ground. Some species create nesting aggregations with hundreds of burrows in a small area, resembling tiny mining operations. These bees emerge in early spring, often when the ground is barely warm, and they're crucial pollinators for fruit trees and early blooming wildflowers. Bumblebees have a special talent called buzz pollination. They grab onto a flower and vibrate their wing muscles rapidly, shaking pollen out of the flower's anthers like pepper from a shaker. This technique is particularly effective for flowers like tomatoes and blueberries, which hold their pollen inside tube-like anthers with only tiny openings. The buzzing sound, a middle C note, vibrates at just the right frequency to shake pollen loose. Not all bees can do this. Honeybees can't buzz, pollinate, which is why tomatoes grown in greenhouses often need bumblebees or mechanical pollinators to set fruit. The bumblebee's fuzzy body can also carry more pollen than a honeybee's relatively smooth body, making these large bees particularly efficient pollinators. Bumblebees can also fly in colder temperatures than most other bees. They can vibrate their flight muscles to generate heat, warming their bodies to operating temperature, even when the air is cool. This ability makes bumblebees essential pollinators in northern regions and at high elevations where other bees can't function. They're often the first bees active in spring and the last still foraging in autumn. Butterflies are another important group of pollinators. With their long, thin tongues, called proboscises, butterflies can reach nectar deep inside tubular flowers. They're especially attracted to flat-topped flowers where they can land and perch while they feed. Butterflies see colors differently than we do, perceiving wavelengths into the ultraviolet range. What looks like a plain white flower to us might display a dazzling bullseye pattern to a butterfly. The proboscis of a butterfly is a remarkable structure. When not in use, it coils up like a watch spring beneath the butterfly's head. When the butterfly finds a flower, it uncoils this long, tube-like tongue and extends it deep into the flower to reach the nectar. The proboscis works like a straw, drawing liquid up through capillary action and muscular pumping. Some butterflies have proboscises that extend longer than their entire body length, allowing them to access nectar in flowers with very deep tubes. Different butterfly species prefer different flower shapes and colors. Swallowtails, with their powerful flight, often visit flowers while hovering, dipping down to feed without landing. Fritillaries and crescents prefer to land on flower heads, methodically moving from floret to floret. Skippers, small butterfly relatives with thick bodies, tend to visit smaller flowers and often feed from the same flower species repeatedly during a foraging bout. Moths are the night shift pollinators, visiting flowers after the sun sets. Many night blooming flowers are white or pale colored to show up in low light, and they often have intense fragrances to help moths find them in the darkness. Hawk moths, with their exceptionally long tongues, can reach nectar in flowers with very deep tubes. Some hawk moth species have tongues extending 10 inches or more, perfectly matched to the flowers they pollinate. The sphinx moth, also called a hawk moth or hummingbird moth, hovers in front of flowers while feeding, looking remarkably like a tiny hummingbird. These moths can beat their wings over 80 times per second, creating the hum that gives them one of their common names. They feed at dusk and dawn, visiting flowers like petunias, 4 o'clocks, and tobacco plants. Their long tongues can access nectar that other pollinators cannot reach. One of the most extraordinary examples of plant pollinator coevolution involves a Madagascar orchid discovered in 1862. The orchid, Angraecum sesquipedale, has a nectar spur that extends nearly 12 inches deep. When Charles Darwin first saw this flower, he predicted that there must exist a moth with a tongue long enough to reach the nectar at the bottom of that impossibly long tube. Naturalists scoffed at the idea, but 41 years after Darwin's death, such a moth was discovered, a hawk moth with a tongue that uncoils to nearly a foot in length. The moth was named Xanthopan morgani predicta, with predicta meaning predicted, honoring Darwin's insight. Yucca moths and yucca plants have an even more remarkable relationship. The female yucca moth collects pollen from one yucca flower, then flies to another flower, where she deliberately deposits the pollen on the stigma. This isn't accidental pollination. The moth is actively fertilizing the flower. Then she lays her eggs inside the flower's ovary. When the eggs hatch, the larvae will eat some of the developing seeds, but not all of them. The plant gets pollinated, the moth's offspring get fed, and both benefit. Neither can survive without the other. If yucca moths disappear, yucca plants cannot reproduce, and if yucca plants vanish, yucca moths have no place to lay their eggs and no food for their larvae. Birds are also significant pollinators, particularly in the Americas. Hummingbirds are the most familiar avian pollinators, with their iridescent feathers and ability to hover in front of flowers while they feed. Hummingbirds have very poor sense of smell, so they rely on sight to find flowers. They're especially attracted to red, orange, and pink tubular flowers. Other bird pollinators include honey eaters in Australia, sunbirds in Africa and Asia, and even some species of parrots. Bats might not seem like likely pollinators, but several hundred species of plants rely on these flying mammals. Bat-pollinated flowers typically open at night, produce large amounts of nectar, and have a musty or fermented scent. The saguaro cactus, agave plants, and even some species of bananas are pollinated by bats. And then there are more unusual pollinators, flies visit many flowers, including some that smell like rotting meat, to attract carrion flies. Beetles were likely among the very first pollinators, and they still visit flowers today, particularly magnolias and water lilies. Even some lizards, possums, and small rodents serve as pollinators in certain ecosystems. Wind is another important pollination method, though wind pollinated plants typically don't have showy flowers. Grasses, oaks, birches, and conifers rely on wind to carry their pollen. These plants produce enormous amounts of lightweight pollen that can travel for miles on air currents. It's this wind-borne pollen that causes many people's allergies each spring. Some flowers have evolved remarkable specializations for their pollinators. Orchids are masters of this, with some species producing flowers that look and even smell like female wasps or bees. Male insects try to mate with a fake female, and in the process, they pick up pollen to carry to the next flower. Other orchids have flowers shaped like tiny buckets that bees fall into, with only one exit path that forces the bee to brush against the flower's pollen on its way out. The relationship between flowers and their pollinators is so finely tuned that some species are completely dependent on each other. The yucca plant can only be pollinated by yucca moths, and yucca moths can only reproduce on yucca plants. Fig wasps and fig trees have a similar exclusive relationship. If one partner in these relationships disappears, the other cannot survive. Today, pollinators face many challenges, including habitat loss, pesticide use, disease, and climate change. The decline of pollinator populations is a serious concern because approximately 75% of the world's food crops depend at least partially on animal pollination. Protecting pollinators means protecting the flowers they depend on and the landscapes where both can thrive. Giants and miniatures, the extremes of flower size. In the world of flowers, size varies dramatically. Some blooms are so tiny you'd need a magnifying glass to see their details, while others are large enough to make headlines when they bloom. The largest flower in the world belongs to Rafflesia arnoldi, a parasitic plant native to the rainforests of Sumatra and Borneo. This remarkable flower can grow up to 3 feet across and weigh up to 24 pounds. The largest specimen ever recorded measured nearly 4 feet in diameter. Rafflesia has no leaves, stems, or roots of its own. Instead, it lives as a parasite inside the tissues of jungle vines, only becoming visible when it's ready to bloom. The flower itself is a spectacular sight, with 5 thick, reddish-brown petals marked with white spots surrounding a central chamber. But beauty is in the eye of the beholder, because Rafflesia arnoldi has another claim to fame. It smells like rotting meat. This foul odor, caused by sulfur-containing compounds, attracts carrion flies and beetles, which serve as the flower's pollinators. The flies are tricked into thinking they've found a good place to lay their eggs, and in the process, they transfer pollen between blooms. Blooming a Rafflesia flower is a rare event. The bud takes many months to develop, growing slowly to the size of a cabbage. When it finally opens, the flower only lasts for about 5 to 7 days before it withers and dies. During that brief time, it must be visited by pollinators and successfully produce seeds, or that year's effort will have been for nothing. At the opposite end of the spectrum is the smallest flower in the world, found in the genus Wolffia, commonly known as watermeal. These are aquatic plants that float on still water, and they're so tiny that the entire plant, flower included, is less than 1 millimeter long. Several individual Wolfia plants could fit comfortably on the head of a pin. The flowers of Wolfia are incredibly simple, consisting of just a single stamen and a single pistil. There are no petals, no sepals, no bright colors or attractive scents. These plants don't need to attract pollinators because they reproduce primarily through simple division, budding off tiny copies of themselves. When they do flower, which is rare, the pollen is dispersed by wind or water. Despite their minute size, Wolfia plants grow incredibly fast, doubling their population every few days under ideal conditions. They're also surprisingly nutritious, containing more protein than soybeans, and in some parts of Southeast Asia, they're harvested and eaten as vegetables. Between these two extremes, flowers come in every size imaginable. The Titan arum, also called the corpse flower, produces the world's largest unbranched inflorescence, a towering structure that can reach over 10 feet tall. While technically, this is a cluster of many small flowers rather than a single bloom, it's still an impressive sight, and like Rafflesia, it attracts pollinators with its smell of rotting flesh. The queen of the night cactus produces flowers that can measure up to 12 inches across, blooming for just a single night before wilting in the morning sun. At the other end, tiny alpine flowers might be only a few millimeters wide, perfectly adapted to harsh mountain environments. Size matters in the world of flowers, but bigger isn't always better. Each flower is exactly the size it needs to be to attract its pollinators, protect its reproductive parts, and produce seeds successfully in its particular environment. Flowers that bloom in darkness. Not all flowers wait for the sun. Some of the most enchanting blooms save their show for after dark, opening their petals only when evening falls and the world grows quiet. Night blooming flowers have evolved this schedule for good reason. By opening at night, they avoid competition with day blooming flowers for pollinators. They also conserve water because the cooler night air means less moisture is lost through evaporation, and they attract a completely different set of pollinators, the creatures that are active after dark. The moonflower is one of the most beloved night bloomers. A close relative of the morning glory, moonflowers produce large, white, trumpet-shaped blooms that unfurl at dusk. As the name suggests, these flowers seem to glow in the moonlight, their pure white petals reflecting even the faintest light. They release a sweet, almost intoxicating fragrance that carries far on night breezes, attracting hawk moths and other nocturnal pollinators. Evening primrose is another flower that waits for dusk. These plants produce bright yellow flowers that open so quickly you can actually watch the petals unfurl if you sit patiently at sunset. The flowers remain open through the night and into the early morning hours before closing as the day heats up. Night blooming jasmine, also called queen of the night, is a shrub that produces small, tubular white flowers. During the day, these flowers are unremarkable, even plain, but at night, they release one of the most powerful fragrances in the plant kingdom, a sweet, almost overwhelming perfume that can scent an entire garden. Perhaps the most dramatic night bloomer is the night blooming cereus, a name applied to several species of cacti. These plants can go years without flowering, and when they finally do bloom, it's an event. The flower buds swell over several weeks, growing larger and larger. Then, on a single night, often synchronized across all the plants in a region, the buds open into spectacular white flowers that can measure up to 12 inches across. People throw serious parties when their plants are about to bloom, inviting friends and family to witness the opening. The flowers begin to open after sunset, the petals slowly spiraling outward until the bloom is fully open around midnight. The flowers emit a rich, sweet fragrance. But by dawn, the show is over. The petals wilt, and the flower, after just one night of glory, fades away forever. 4 o'clocks get their name from their blooming time. These cheerful flowers open in the late afternoon, around 4 o'clock, and remain open through the night before closing the next morning. They come in a variety of colors, including pink, yellow, red, and white, and sometimes a single plant will produce flowers in multiple colors. Night phlox, also known as midnight candy, produces small, star-shaped white flowers that release a delicious scent described as a mixture of vanilla, honey, and almond after the sun goes down. The fragrance is so appealing that these plants are favorites for moon gardens, specially designed spaces meant to be enjoyed at night. Tuberose is a night fragrant flower with an intense, exotic perfume. The waxy white blooms open in the evening, and the scent, which has been described as a blend of jasmine, orange blossom, and spice, grows stronger as the night progresses. Tuberose has been used in perfumery for centuries, and just a few flowers can scent an entire room. Night blooming water lilies add magic to ponds and water gardens. These tropical plants produce flowers that open at dusk and close by mid-morning. Unlike their day-blooming cousins, night-blooming water lilies come in rich colors like deep red, pink, and purple, along with white, and they have a subtle but pleasant fragrance. The dragon fruit cactus, which gives us the exotic dragon fruit sold in markets, produces enormous white flowers that bloom at night. These blooms can be a foot across, with long, slender petals surrounding a burst of stamens. They're pollinated by bats and moths, and like many night bloomers, they only flower for a single night. Gardeners who plant moon gardens, designed specifically for nighttime enjoyment, often choose plants with white or pale flowers that show up well in low light, combined with night fragrant plants that fill the air with perfume. Add some silvery leafed plants that catch the moonlight, and you have a space that comes alive when the rest of the garden goes to sleep. The language of flowers. Through time, for centuries, humans have assigned meanings to flowers, creating elaborate codes and languages through which they could express feelings that words could not capture. This practice, known as floriography, reached its height during the Victorian era, when strict social conventions made direct expression of emotions difficult. In Victorian times, entire conversations could be conducted through the exchange of carefully chosen bouquets. The type of flower, its color, how it was presented, and even which hand delivered it, all carried significance. A red rose declared love, while a yellow rose suggested jealousy or infidelity. White roses spoke of purity and innocence. Red carnations meant, "My heart aches for you," while striped carnations declared, "I cannot be with you." The complexity of the Victorian language of flowers was remarkable. Not only did the specific flower matter, but also how the flowers were arranged. A bouquet given upside down reversed the meaning of the flowers, so that a gift of friendship became an insult. The way ribbons were tied also conveyed information. Tied to the left, the message referred to the giver. Tied to the right, it concerned the recipient. Even the condition of the flowers had meaning. Fresh, vibrant blooms suggested hope and vigor, while wilted flowers delivered a message of rejection or waning affection. A single flower versus a bouquet, the presence or absence of thorns, whether buds were included with blooms. All of these details were carefully noted and interpreted. Different cultures developed their own flower symbolism. In Japan, cherry blossoms represent the fleeting nature of life, as these delicate flowers bloom for only a brief time each spring. This transient beauty is deeply meaningful in Japanese culture, reminding people to appreciate the present moment. Lotus flowers hold profound significance in Hindu and Buddhist traditions, representing spiritual awakening and purity. The lotus grows in muddy water but produces pristine blooms, symbolizing the ability to rise above worldly concerns and achieve enlightenment. The flower closes at night and sinks underwater, then emerges again in the morning, which is seen as a metaphor for rebirth and renewal. In Mexico, marigolds are the flowers of the dead, used to guide spirits during Dia de los Muertos celebrations. Their bright orange and yellow colors and strong scent are believed to help the deceased find their way back to visit the living. Entire paths made of marigold petals lead from streets to home altars during this important holiday. Orange blossoms have long symbolized weddings and new beginnings. In Victorian times, they represented fertility and purity, and brides often wore wreaths of orange blossoms or carried them in their bouquets. This tradition continues in some cultures today. Forget-me-nots, with their delicate blue blooms, are associated with remembrance and true love. Medieval legends told of a knight who, while picking these flowers for his lady, fell into a river. As he was swept away by the current, he threw the flowers to his beloved and cried out, "Forget-me-not," giving the flower its poignant name. Chrysanthemums carry different meanings in different cultures. In much of Asia, they're associated with autumn, longevity, and happiness. In Europe and the United States, they're often seen as funeral flowers. In Japan, the chrysanthemum is so important it's the symbol of the emperor and appears on the imperial seal. Sunflowers, with their faces that track the sun across the sky, represent adoration, loyalty, and longevity. They're seen as symbols of warmth and happiness, appropriate given their bright, sunny appearance. In Native American culture, sunflowers were highly valued food sources and represented the sun god. Lavender has long been associated with devotion, purity, and silence. In Roman times, it was used to scent bathwater, giving the plant its name from the Latin lavare, meaning to wash. During the Victorian era, lavender represented refinement and grace. While the Victorian language of flowers has faded from everyday use, we still associate certain flowers with particular occasions and emotions. Red roses remain the flower of romantic love. White lilies appear at funerals and weddings alike, representing both purity and renewal. Yellow flowers brighten sick rooms and celebrate friendships. We may no longer follow the intricate rules of florography, but we continue to speak through flowers, using their beauty to express what's in our hearts. Thus, the oldest and most enduring flowers Some flowers, once planted, keep returning year after year, decade after decade, even outliving the people who first tended them. These are the perennials that measure their lives, not in seasons, but in generations. Peonies are among the longest lived flowering plants. A single peony plant can live for 50 years, a century, or even longer with minimal care. There are documented cases of peonies that continue to bloom more than 100 years after they were first planted. These resilient plants develop deep, extensive root systems that allow them to survive droughts, cold winters, and other challenges. Each spring, they return with lush, fragrant blooms that seem to get better with age. The secret to a peony's longevity is simple. They don't like to be disturbed. Once planted in a suitable location, peonies will happily stay there for generations. They prefer a sunny spot with good drainage, and in return, they'll reward you with decades of beautiful flowers. The blooms themselves last only about a week, but during that time, they're magnificent, with full, ruffled petals and sweet fragrances that fill gardens with perfume. Baptisia, also known as false indigo, is another long lived perennial that can thrive for many decades. These plants develop enormous tap roots that extend deep into the soil, making them incredibly drought tolerant once established. That same deep root system is why Baptisia doesn't like to be transplanted. The plants grow slowly at first, taking a few years to reach maturity, but once established, they're nearly indestructible. Their blue, lupine like flowers appear in late spring, followed by attractive seed pods that provide interest through summer and fall. Daylilies, despite their name suggesting a single day of bloom, are tough, long lived plants. Each individual flower lasts only about a day, but healthy daylily plants produce new blooms continuously throughout their flowering season, which can last for weeks. The plants themselves can live for many years, slowly expanding to form large clumps. Some heirloom varieties of daylilies have been growing in the same spots for 50 years or more. Irises, particularly bearded irises, are remarkably long lived. These elegant flowers have been cultivated for thousands of years, appearing in ancient Egyptian art and Greek mythology. Modern iris plants can easily live for 20 or 30 years, and with occasional division, they can continue indefinitely. Their sword-like foliage remains attractive even when the plants aren't blooming. Hosta plants are grown primarily for their foliage, but they also produce spikes of lavender or white flowers in summer. These shade-loving perennials can live for decades, slowly growing larger and more impressive each year. Some hosta varieties become enormous, with leaves 2 feet long and plants spreading 4 or 5 feet across. Old garden roses, particularly antique varieties like albus and gallicas, can live for centuries. There are rose bushes in Europe that are documented to be over 1,000 years old. The famous rose at Hildesheim Cathedral in Germany is believed to be over 1,100 years old, making it possibly the oldest living rose in the world. These heritage roses are incredibly tough, surviving neglect and harsh conditions that would kill modern hybrid tea roses. Bleeding hearts, with their distinctive heart-shaped flowers, return faithfully year after year. The plants die back in summer after flowering, but the roots remain alive underground, ready to send up new growth the following spring. A well-established bleeding heart can live for 20 years or more. Hardy geraniums Not to be confused with the tender geraniums, often used as annuals, are tough perennials that can live for many years. These low-growing plants spread slowly but steadily, forming dense mats covered with flowers in shades of blue, purple, pink, or white. The longevity of these perennials teaches us something important. In a world that often feels rushed and temporary, these plants remind us that some beauty endures. A peony planted by a grandmother might bloom for her great-grandchildren. A rose bush planted at a wedding might still be flowering on the couple's golden anniversary. These patient plants don't demand constant attention. They simply ask to be left in peace, and in return, they offer decades of reliable beauty. Flowers as food and medicine. Many flowers are not just beautiful to look at, they're also edible and medicinal, offering flavors, fragrances, and healing properties that humans have valued for thousands of years. Lavender is perhaps one of the most versatile flowers. Its purple blooms can be dried and used in cooking, adding a subtle floral note to cookies, cakes, honey, and even savory dishes. Lavender tea helps promote relaxation and better sleep. The essential oil has calming aromatherapy benefits and antimicrobial properties. Ancient Romans added lavender to their bath water, both for its pleasant scent and its cleansing effects. The key to cooking with lavender is using it sparingly. Too much lavender can make food taste soapy or perfumey, but the right amount adds a sophisticated floral note that enhances both sweet and savory dishes. French cuisine has long incorporated lavender into dishes like herbes de Provence, a blend of dried herbs that often includes lavender flowers, along with thyme, rosemary, and other aromatics. Lavender shortbread, lavender honey, and lavender infused cream are delicate treats when made properly. Lavender's medicinal uses have been documented for centuries. The essential oil has genuine antimicrobial properties, making it useful in natural cleaning products and skincare preparations. Research has shown that lavender aromatherapy can help reduce anxiety and improve sleep quality. Some studies suggest it may help reduce pain and inflammation when applied topically. The flowers contain compounds called terpenes, including linalool and linaloyl acetate, which are responsible for both the scent and many of the therapeutic effects. Chamomile flowers have been used for centuries as a gentle medicinal herb. The small, daisy-like blooms make a tea that helps reduce inflammation, promotes relaxation, aids digestion, and may help with sleep. Chamomile contains compounds that have mild sedative effects, which is why a cup of chamomile tea before bed is a time-honored remedy for insomnia. The flowers are packed with antioxidants and have been used traditionally to treat everything from minor wounds to menstrual cramps. There are actually two main types of chamomile used medicinally: German chamomile and Roman chamomile. German chamomile is usually considered more potent and is the type most commonly used in teas and medicinal preparations. The flowers contain several active compounds, including chamazoline, which has anti-inflammatory properties, and apigenin, which may have anti-anxiety effects. When making chamomile tea, using fresh or recently dried flowers produces the best flavor and preserves more of the beneficial compounds. Steeping the flowers in water that's hot but not quite boiling for about 5 minutes creates a mild apple-scented tea. Chamomile can also be used topically. Cooled chamomile tea makes a soothing rinse for irritated skin, or can be used as a hair rinse to add golden highlights to light-colored hair. Chamomile-infused oil can be used in skincare preparations to help soothe inflammation and promote healing. The flowers have been used in eye compresses to reduce puffiness and inflammation, though care must be taken to keep preparations clean to avoid infection. Dandelions, often dismissed as weeds, are entirely edible and nutritious. The bright yellow flowers can be eaten fresh in salads, used to make wine, or fried into fritters. They're high in vitamins A and C. The young leaves make a nutritious, if slightly bitter, salad green. Even the roots can be dried, roasted, and used as a coffee substitute. Dandelion has been used in traditional medicine to support liver function and as a mild diuretic. Every part of the dandelion plant is useful. The flowers, best harvested in spring when they're young and tender, can be pulled from the green base and added to salads, where they add a slightly honey-like sweetness. Dandelion flower fritters are made by dipping the flowers in batter and frying them until golden. Dandelion wine is a traditional country beverage made by fermenting the petals with sugar and yeast, producing a light, floral wine. The leaves, harvested when young before the plant flowers, make a nutritious addition to salads or can be cooked like spinach. They contain more vitamin A than carrots and more vitamin C than oranges. The slight bitterness comes from compounds called taraxacin and other sesquiterpene lactones, which may stimulate digestion. Some people blanch the leaves briefly in boiling water to reduce the bitterness. Dandelion root has a long history in herbal medicine, particularly in Europe and China. The roots are harvested in fall when the plant has stored energy for winter. They can be dried and used to make a therapeutic tea that traditional herbalists recommend for liver support and as a gentle laxative and diuretic. Roasted dandelion root makes a caffeine-free coffee substitute with a slightly bitter, earthy flavor that some people find surprisingly satisfying. Nasturtiums add both beauty and spice to gardens. Every part of the plant is edible. The flowers have a peppery, slightly spicy flavor, similar to watercress, making them perfect for adding zing to salads. They're rich in vitamin C and contain compounds that have natural antibiotic properties. The leaves are also edible, with an even stronger peppery taste, and the unripe seed pods can be pickled and used like capers. Rose petals have been used in cooking and medicine for thousands of years. They can be made into rose water, used to flavor desserts and Middle Eastern dishes, or crystallized as elegant cake decorations. Rose hip tea, made from the fruit of the rose plant, is extremely high in vitamin C and was used during World War II in Britain when citrus fruits were scarce. Rose oil has been used in perfumery and aromatherapy, and topically, rose preparations are said to soothe skin and reduce inflammation. Violets produce small, sweet flowers that are completely edible. They've been candied and used to decorate cakes since Victorian times. Fresh violet flowers can be added to salads for a mild, sweet flavor. Violet leaves are also edible and very high in vitamins A and C. In herbal medicine, violets have been used to soothe coughs and respiratory issues. Calendula, also known as pot marigold, has bright orange or yellow flowers that are both edible and medicinal. The petals add color to salads and can be used as a saffron substitute in cooking. Medicinally, calendula is used topically as a healing salve for cuts burns and skin irritations. It has anti-inflammatory and antimicrobial properties that make it valuable in herbal medicine. Hibiscus flowers, particularly the variety known as roselle, are used to make a tart, cranberry-like tea that's popular worldwide. The dried flowers are rich in vitamin C and antioxidants. Hibiscus tea has been shown in some studies to help lower blood pressure and cholesterol levels. The flowers are also used in jams, syrups, and as a natural food coloring. Elderflowers, the creamy white blooms of the elderberry shrub, have a sweet, honey-like flavor. They're used to make cordials, wines, and champagnes. Elderflower tea has traditionally been used to reduce fevers, clear sinuses, and ease allergies. The flowers can also be dipped in batter and fried to make delicate fritters. Marigolds, specifically French marigolds and African marigolds, have edible petals that add color to dishes. They have a slightly spicy, sometimes citrusy flavor. Marigold tea has anti-inflammatory properties and is used traditionally for digestive issues and to support skin health. It's crucial to note that not all flowers are safe to eat. Many common garden flowers are toxic. Before eating any flower, you must be absolutely certain of its identification and that it's a safe, edible variety. Flowers purchased from florists should never be eaten, as they're often treated with chemicals that aren't food safe. Only eat flowers that you know are edible, that have been grown without pesticides, and that you've positively identified. The tradition of using flowers as food and medicine reminds us that these plants offer more than just beauty. They've sustained and healed humanity for millennia, and many of these traditional uses are now being validated by modern science. Rewer, the dark side, poisonous flowers. Not all flowers extend a friendly welcome. Some of the most beautiful blooms in nature are also among the deadliest, containing toxins powerful enough to kill humans and animals. These plants have evolved poisons as defenses against being eaten, and they're remarkably effective. Deadly nightshade, or belladonna, earns its ominous name. This plant produces attractive purple flowers and shiny black berries that might tempt children or animals, but every part of the plant contains tropane alkaloids, including atropine and scopolamine. These compounds cause rapid heartbeat, hallucinations, seizures, and paralysis of involuntary muscles, including the heart. As few as 2 berries can kill a child. Historically, belladonna was used as a poison, and the name itself means beautiful woman in Italian, referring to the practice of using diluted extracts to dilate pupils, which was considered attractive. The atropine in belladonna works by blocking acetylcholine receptors in the nervous system, essentially jamming the signals that control many automatic body functions. This is why poisoning causes such diverse symptoms. Dry mouth occurs because salivary glands stop working. Rapid heartbeat happens because the signals that slow the heart are blocked, and hallucinations result from effects on the brain. Interestingly, in carefully controlled doses, atropine is used medically today. Eye doctors use it to dilate pupils for examinations, and emergency medical personnel use it to treat certain types of poisoning and heart rhythm problems. The dose truly does make the poison. Oleander is one of the most poisonous plants in the world. This popular ornamental shrub produces beautiful clusters of pink, white, or red flowers with a sweet fragrance, but every part of the plant, from roots to flowers to nectar, contains cardiac glycosides that affect the heart. Even honey made by bees that visited oleander flowers can be toxic. There have been cases of people being poisoned by using oleander branches to roast food over a campfire. The toxins cause irregular heartbeat, nausea, and if enough is ingested, death from heart failure. The cardiac glycosides in oleander, particularly oleandrin and narration, work by interfering with the sodium potassium pump in heart muscle cells. This is the same mechanism by which digitalis from foxglove works, but oleander's toxins are even more potent. The heart's electrical system becomes disrupted, causing it to beat irregularly, sometimes too fast, sometimes too slow, and eventually stopping altogether. What makes oleander particularly dangerous is how little is needed to cause harm. Eating a single leaf can be fatal for a child, and even less for a pet. The toxins are remarkably stable. They don't break down with cooking or drying. Burning oleander branches releases toxic smoke. Even water in which oleander flowers have been sitting becomes contaminated. In some regions, well-meaning people have been poisoned after using oleander branches as skewers for roasting food, or after drinking tea made with oleander leaves, thinking it was some other plant. The beauty of the flowers belies their extreme danger. Foxglove produces tall spikes of tubular purple, pink, or white flowers that are beloved by gardeners. But these beautiful blooms contain digitalis, a powerful cardiac glycoside. While digitalis is used medically in carefully controlled doses to treat heart conditions, eating foxglove can cause irregular heartbeat, visual disturbances, and death. Even handling the plant can cause skin irritation in some people. The digitalis in foxglove has been used medicinally since the 18th century when an English physician named William Withering learned about its use from a folk healer. He spent years carefully studying the plant, determining the correct dosage and which patients might benefit. His work transformed medicine, giving doctors a powerful tool for treating heart failure and abnormal heart rhythms. But the therapeutic window is narrow. The difference between a helpful dose and a deadly dose is small, which is why foxglove remains one of the most carefully monitored drugs when used medically. Symptoms of foxglove poisoning include visual disturbances where everything appears tinged with yellow or green, a feeling that the heart is skipping beats or racing, nausea, vomiting, and confusion. The painter Vincent van Gogh may have experienced digitalis toxicity, possibly from taking foxglove medicinally. Some art historians believe the yellow halos he painted around lights in some of his paintings might reflect the vision disturbances caused by digitalis. Lily of the Valley, with its delicate white, bell-shaped flowers and sweet scent, seems the picture of innocence. But this little woodland plant contains cardiac glycosides throughout all its parts, including the attractive red berries it produces later in the season. Ingestion can cause irregular heartbeat, confusion, and heart failure. Even the water from a vase holding lily of the valley can be toxic if consumed. The glycosides in lily of the valley, particularly convalitoxin, are structurally similar to those in foxglove, but act even more quickly. Symptoms can appear within minutes to a few hours after ingestion. Children are particularly at risk because the bright red berries look tempting and the flowers have a pleasant, sweet scent that doesn't suggest danger. Animals, especially cats and dogs, are also vulnerable if they chew on the plants. Despite its toxicity, Lily of the Valley has been used in traditional medicine, particularly in Russia and Europe, where preparations were made to treat heart conditions. But like all cardiac glycosides, the margin between therapeutic and toxic doses is dangerously small, and today, safer alternatives are available. Castor bean plants produce attractive red seed pods, but the seeds contain ricin, one of the most potent toxins known. A single seed, if chewed, can be fatal to a child. Ricin prevents cells from making proteins, leading to cell death throughout the body. There is no antidote. The seeds are used to produce castor oil, but the ricin is removed during processing. The plant itself, with its large, tropical-looking leaves, is often grown as an ornamental. Angel's trumpet, despite its heavenly name, is another dangerous beauty. This plant produces enormous, pendulous, trumpet-shaped flowers in shades of white, pink, yellow, or peach. All parts contain tropane alkaloids similar to those in belladonna, causing hallucinations, paralysis, and potentially death. The flowers have a sweet, intoxicating fragrance, which makes them all the more deceptive. Azaleas and rhododendrons, staples of many gardens, contain gray anotoxins in all parts of the plant, but especially in the leaves, and nectar, even honey made by bees that visited these flowers can be toxic. This mad honey has been known since ancient times. Greek soldiers who consumed it suffered hallucinations and illness. Symptoms of azalea poisoning include drooling, vomiting, diarrhea, and potentially heart problems. Monkshood, also called wolfsbane, contains aconitine, an extremely dangerous toxin that causes burning sensations, vomiting, and if enough is absorbed, respiratory failure and heart arrhythmia. The plant gets its common name from the hood-shaped blue or purple flowers. Historically, the sap was used to poison arrows and to kill wolves, hence wolfsbane, larkspur, and delphinium, with their tall spikes of blue, purple, pink, or white flowers, contain alkaloids that are toxic to both humans and livestock. Cattle grazing in pastures with larkspur have been poisoned in significant numbers. The toxins cause muscle paralysis, including paralysis of the respiratory muscles. Autumn crocus, or meadow saffron, produces delicate purple flowers in fall that resemble spring crocuses. But this plant contains colchicine, a toxic alkaloid that can cause severe organ damage and death. There's no antidote. The bulbs are sometimes mistaken for onions or other edible bulbs, leading to accidental poisonings. It's important to note that many of these poisonous plants have been used medicinally throughout history. The difference between a medicine and a poison is often just the dose. Foxglove gives us digitalis for heart patients. Deadly nightshade provides atropine, used by eye doctors and emergency medicine. But these uses require expert knowledge and precise dosing. In the garden or the wild, these plants should be appreciated for their beauty, but treated with great respect and caution. How flowers respond to climate change. Flowers are among the most sensitive indicators of climate change. They respond to temperature, day length, precipitation, and other environmental cues. And as our climate shifts, flowers are shifting too, blooming earlier, changing colors, and adapting in ways both subtle and profound. One of the most visible changes is the timing of flowering. Spring blooming plants across the northern hemisphere are now flowering earlier than they did a century ago. Cherry blossoms in Washington, D.C. now reach peak bloom about a week earlier than they did in the 1920s. In the United Kingdom, flowers are blooming nearly a month earlier, on average, than they did in the 1750s. This advancement in flowering time is directly correlated with rising spring temperatures. But the change isn't uniform across all plants. Spring flowering species, like crocuses and daffodils, show the strongest response to warming temperatures, blooming significantly earlier. Summer and fall flowering plants show less dramatic shifts, or, in some cases, actually bloom later as summer temperatures exceed their optimal range. This difference in response creates what scientists call phenological mismatch, where the timing between interconnected species becomes misaligned. A flower might bloom earlier, but its pollinators might not emerge from dormancy on the same schedule. The flower could finish blooming before its pollinators arrive, resulting in failed reproduction for both plant and pollinator. This mismatch is particularly concerning for specialist pollinators that depend on a single plant species and for plants that depend on specific pollinators. Flowers are also changing in subtler ways. Research has shown that many flowers are adjusting the ultraviolet pigments in their petals in response to changing ozone levels and temperatures. These UV patterns are invisible to humans, but crucial for attracting pollinators like bees. Some flowers are increasing UV absorbing pigments as protection against increased UV radiation when ozone levels decline. Others are reducing these pigments when temperatures rise, preventing their pollen from overheating. These changes could make flowers more or less attractive to pollinators, potentially affecting reproduction success. Some flowers are growing larger in response to climate change. Morning glories, for instance, have been documented producing larger flowers with more nectar and pollen now compared to specimens from just a decade earlier. This appears to be an adaptation to attract more pollinators as pollinator populations decline and become less reliable. Larger flowers with greater rewards are more likely to attract the pollinators that do exist. The geographic ranges of many flowering plants are shifting. As temperatures warm, plants are expanding northward and to higher elevations, following the climate conditions they're adapted to. This creates new plant communities and can lead to competition between native plants and new arrivals. Some mountain wildflowers are being squeezed upward as warming temperatures allow lower elevation species to move up the slopes. Eventually, mountaintop plants may run out of habitat entirely. Extreme weather events, which are becoming more frequent with climate change, pose additional challenges. Late spring frosts can damage or kill early blooming flowers that have been triggered to bloom by unseasonably warm weather. Droughts can stress plants and reduce flowering. Intense storms can physically damage flowers and prevent pollinators from flying. Changes in precipitation patterns affect flowering too. Some regions are receiving more rain, which can delay or disrupt flowering. Other areas are experiencing more frequent droughts, which can cause flowers to bloom early as a stress response, produce fewer blooms, or skip flowering entirely to conserve resources for survival. Interestingly, not all changes are negative. Longer growing seasons in some regions mean flowers have more time to grow and bloom. Mild winters can allow some plants to bloom year round in areas where they once went dormant. Some plant species are showing remarkable resilience and adaptive capacity, but the overall picture is concerning. The intricate timing relationships between flowers and pollinators have evolved over thousands of years. Rapid climate change is disrupting these relationships faster than evolution can adapt. Plants with shorter life cycles may be able to evolve more quickly, but long lived perennials are stuck with the genes they have. Flowers don't exist in isolation, they're part of complex ecosystems where countless species depend on each other. When flowering times shift, it ripples through the ecosystem, affecting not just pollinators, but also the birds and other animals that eat those pollinators, the plants that depend on seed dispersers, and on and on. Flowers are telling us, in their silent way, that our climate is changing and the natural world is struggling to keep pace. The global diversity of flowers. Flowers have colonized nearly every habitat on Earth, from scorching deserts to frozen tundra, from steamy rainforests to windswept coastlines. This incredible diversity shows us the remarkable adaptability of flowering plants. In tropical rainforests, flowers reach their most exuberant diversity. The warm, humid conditions and year round growing season support thousands of species. Orchids alone account for more than 25,000 species worldwide, most of them found in tropical regions. These exotic flowers have evolved into an astounding array of forms, colors, and fragrances, with some species producing blooms that last for months. Desert flowers face a completely different challenge. Too little water. Many desert plants bloom only after rare rainfall, carpeting the landscape with color for a few brief weeks before setting seed and going dormant again. Desert marigolds, globe mallows, and poppies create spectacular displays that can be seen from space after a good rainy season. The seeds of these plants can remain dormant in the soil for years, even decades, waiting patiently for conditions suitable for germination. Alpine flowers grow at high elevations where the growing season is short and conditions are harsh. These tough little plants often grow in cushion or mat forms to conserve heat and resist drying winds. Edelweiss, the famous mountain flower, has fuzzy white leaves that protect it from cold and reduce water loss. Alpine forget-me-nots produce brilliant blue flowers that seem too delicate for such a harsh environment. These flowers must complete their entire life cycle, from germination to flowering to seed production, in just a few months before winter returns. Arctic flowers face perhaps the most extreme conditions. During the brief Arctic summer, when the sun never sets, flowers burst into bloom, taking advantage of 24 hours of daylight to grow and reproduce as quickly as possible. Arctic poppies track the sun across the sky, focusing heat on their centers to attract insects. Purple saxifrage can bloom while still partially covered by snow, making it one of the first flowers to appear in the spring. Aquatic flowers have adapted to life in water. Water lilies root in pond or lake bottoms, but send their leaves and flowers up to float on the surface. Lotus flowers rise above the water on tall stems. Their leaves have a remarkable self-cleaning property. Water rolls off them, carrying dirt away, which is why lotus leaves are always clean, despite growing in muddy water. This property has inspired a whole field of materials, science called biomimicry. Coastal flowers must tolerate salt spray, sandy soils, and strong winds. Beach morning glories creep along sand dunes, their roots helping to stabilize the sand. Sea thrift grows in tight cushions on rocky cliffs, its pink flowers nodding in ocean breezes. Carnivorous flowers have taken an unusual evolutionary path. In nutrient-poor environments like bogs and swamps, some plants have evolved to supplement their diet by trapping and digesting insects. The flowers of pitcher plants, sundews, and Venus flytraps still need to attract pollinators, not prey, so they often bloom on tall stalks high above the traps, keeping their beneficial visitors safe while unwitting insects become meals. Epiphytic flowers, like many orchids and bromeliads, grow on other plants rather than in soil. They're not parasitic. They just use trees as platforms to reach light in crowded rainforests. These plants have evolved to capture water and nutrients from rain and decaying debris caught in their roots or specialized leaf structures. From the smallest alpine wildflower to massive tropical blooms, from underwater to high in tree canopies, flowers have found ways to survive and thrive. Each adaptation tells a story of challenges overcome, of evolution finding solutions, of life persisting in even the most unlikely places. Thus, surprising flower, adaptations, and hidden relationships beyond what we've already explored. Flowers have developed some of the most remarkable and unexpected adaptations in the natural world. These strategies show us just how creative evolution can be when solving the challenges of survival and reproduction. Some orchids have evolved to smell like rotting meat or dung to attract flies as pollinators. The flowers often look diseased or decayed as well, complete with dark coloring and textures that mimic decay. Female flies, searching for a place to lay their eggs where their larvae will have food, are fooled by these deceptive flowers. They land on the bloom, sometimes even lay eggs there, and in the process pick up or deposit pollen. The eggs that are laid will not survive, as the flower provides no food for the hatching larvae. But the orchid has achieved pollination through this elaborate deceit. Other orchids take mimicry even further. Some species in the genus Ophrys produce flowers that look, feel, and smell like female wasps or bees. The flowers even mimic the texture of the insect's body, with fuzzy areas and smooth areas in just the right places. Male insects, emerging before females in spring, attempt to mate with these fake females. As the frustrated male tries again and again, he picks up pollen from one flower and transfers it to the next deceptive bloom he encounters. This pseudo-copulation is so convincing that male insects will prefer the flowers even when real females are available. Bucket orchids from Central and South America have flowers shaped like small buckets that partially fill with liquid. Visiting male euglycine bees become intoxicated by fragrances produced by the flower and often slip on the waxy surfaces, falling into the bucket. The only way out is through a narrow tunnel at the front of the bucket. As the bee struggles through this exit, it gets smeared with pollen or deposits pollen it's already carrying. The entire process can take 20 minutes, and the exhausted bee emerges wet and sticky, but alive, while the flower has accomplished pollination. Some flowers can trap insects temporarily. Jack in the pulpit flowers have a structure that acts as a lobster trap. Small flies, attracted by scent, crawl into the flower and find themselves trapped by downward pointing hairs that prevent them from climbing back out. They can walk around inside the flower chamber where they're dusted with pollen or deposit pollen they're carrying. After about a day, the hairs wither and the flies can escape to be trapped by the next jack in the pulpit they visit. The insects aren't harmed, just detained for the flower's purposes. Certain flowers have evolved trap mechanisms for insects. The flowers of Aristolochia, the pipevine, have a curved tube lined with downward pointing hairs. Flies, attracted to the flower, can easily walk down into the tube but cannot climb back out. They're forced to spend the night inside the flower chamber, where they pollinate the female parts of the flower. The next morning, the male parts of the flower ripen, dusting the trapped flies with pollen, and the hairs wither, allowing the newly coated flies to escape and visit another flower. Some flowers heat themselves. The lotus flower can maintain its internal temperature at around 35 degrees Celsius, even when the air temperature drops to 10 degrees. This heat production serves multiple purposes. It helps disperse the flower's scent, making it more attractive to pollinators. It also rewards visiting beetles with a warm place to rest, and it may protect the flower's reproductive parts from cold damage. The sacred lotus uses this thermogenesis so reliably that scientists have used it as a model organism for studying biological heat production in plants. Skunk cabbage produces enough heat to melt snow around it in early spring, allowing it to bloom when the ground is still partially frozen. The plant can maintain its spathe at 20 degrees Celsius, warmer than the surrounding air. This heat helps disperse the flower's distinctive skunk-like odor, attracting the flies and beetles that pollinate it. Flowers can also communicate chemically with each other and with other organisms. When a flower is damaged by an insect, it can release volatile organic compounds into the air. Nearby flowers detect these chemical signals and respond by increasing their own defenses, making themselves less palatable or more toxic to herbivores. Some flowers can even release chemicals that attract predators or parasitoids of the insects that are eating them, essentially calling for help. Lima bean flowers, when damaged by spider mites, release a specific blend of volatile compounds that attracts predatory mites. These helpful mites then hunt down and eat the pest mites, protecting the plant. The flower essentially sends out a chemical SOS that recruits defenders. Some flowers have evolved to bloom in synchrony across wide geographical areas. Night blooming cereus cacti often bloom on the same night across an entire region, with hundreds or thousands of plants opening their flowers simultaneously. The mechanism behind this synchronization isn't fully understood, but it appears to involve environmental cues like temperature, humidity, and moon phase. This coordinated blooming increases the chances that pollinators will move between plants, spreading pollen throughout the population. Bamboo plants, which only flower once every several decades, also show this synchronized blooming. All bamboo plants of the same species will flower simultaneously, even if they're separated by oceans. Plants grown from the same parent stock will bloom at the same time, no matter where in the world they're planted, suggesting an internal clock that counts years. This mass flowering strategy, called masting, overwhelms seed predators. Even though rodents and other animals eat many seeds, so many are produced during a mast year that some inevitably survive to germinate. Some flowers have evolved to attract specific pollinators through ultraviolet patterns. While the flowers may look uniformly colored to human eyes, bees and butterflies see intricate patterns painted in UV wavelengths. These patterns often form bullseye shapes that guide pollinators directly to the nectar source. As the flower ages and becomes less receptive to pollination, These UV patterns often change or fade, signaling to pollinators that this flower is no longer worth visiting. It's a hidden language of light that we've only recently learned to see. And finally, some flowers have evolved to use electrical fields. Recent research has discovered that flowers carry a slight negative electrical charge, while bees flying through the air accumulate a positive charge. When a bee lands on a flower, pollen grains literally jump from the flower's anthers onto the bee due to this electrical attraction. The bee's charge also temporarily changes the electrical field of the flower it visits, and other bees can detect this change, learning that the flower was recently visited and may have less nectar available. This electrical communication adds another dimension to the already complex language between flowers and their pollinators. These remarkable adaptations remind us that flowers are not passive objects of beauty. They're active participants in an ancient dance of survival, employing chemistry, physics, mimicry, and even deception to ensure their genes pass to the next generation. Every flower has a story, a strategy, a reason for being exactly the way it is. Flowers, fascinating flower, facts to carry into dreams. As we approach the end of our journey through the world of flowers, let's gather a collection of brief, fascinating facts, each one a small wonder to contemplate as you drift toward sleep. A single apple tree can produce up to 400,000 blossoms, though only a tiny fraction will become fruit. Each bloom opens for just 3 to 5 days, creating a spectacular but brief display each spring. Sunflowers aren't actually single flowers. What looks like one large bloom is actually hundreds or even thousands of tiny flowers clustered together. The seeds we eat are each the result of a single small flower. Tulip bulbs were once so valuable in Holland that they were used as currency during the tulip mania of the 1630s. Single bulbs sold for prices equivalent to a house. The corpse flower, when it blooms, can raise its internal temperature to nearly human body temperature, helping to spread its foul smell and attract pollinators. Chocolate comes from flowers. Cacao trees produce small flowers that grow directly on the trunk and branches. Only a tiny percentage of these flowers will be successfully pollinated by the midges that visit them, and of those, only some will develop into cacao pods. Some flowers can generate heat. Skunk cabbage can produce enough heat to melt through snow, allowing it to bloom in late winter. The warmth also helps spread its scent to attract pollinating insects. Bees can recognize individual human faces. They can also count up to 4 and understand the concept of zero. All this brain power from an insect with a brain smaller than a sesame seed. The fragrance of flowers changes throughout the day. Many flowers produce the most scent in the evening, when their pollinators are most active. Flowers have been found in ancient Egyptian tombs, still recognizable after thousands of years. A single oak tree can produce over 2,000 flowers in a season, though most people never notice them because they're small, green, and wind pollinated. Black flowers don't exist in nature. What appears black is actually very deep purple, maroon, or burgundy. True black pigments are extremely rare in flowers. The symmetry of flowers follows mathematical patterns. Many flowers display Fibonacci numbers in their petal counts: 3, 5, 8, 13, 21. This same mathematical sequence appears throughout nature. flowers can hear. Recent research suggests that evening primrose flowers can detect the sound of a bee's wings and produce sweeter nectar in response. The longest living flower arrangement ever recorded lasted for 21 days. It was a bouquet of proteas and other long lasting flowers specially treated and cared for. Some flowers bloom only once every several years. Bamboo, which is actually a grass that produces flowers, may bloom only once every 40, 80, or even 120 years. When they do bloom, all the bamboo plants of that species bloom simultaneously over vast areas, then die. Dandelions can produce seeds without pollination, a process called apomixis. Each fluffy seed head can contain up to 200 seeds, all clones of the parent plant. The oldest flowering plant species still in existence today is believed to be Amborella trichopoda, a shrub native to New Caledonia. It's considered a living fossil, representing a very early branch of flowering plant evolution. Flowers can change sex. Some plants produce male flowers early in the season and female flowers later, or vice versa. To prevent self pollination, the nectar in flowers is essentially sugar water, but the exact sweetness varies by species. Some flowers produce nectar that's up to 75% sugar, making it thicker than honey. Cosmos flowers can be used as natural mosquito repellent. The scent that attracts their natural pollinators is unpleasant to mosquitoes. And finally, flowers communicate. When a flower is damaged by an insect, it can release chemical signals that warn nearby flowers. The warned flowers then produce compounds that make them less attractive or less nutritious to herbivores. Closing thoughts. As we come to the end of our exploration, I hope you're feeling peaceful, your mind filled with images of flowers in all their diversity, from ancient blooms that opened when dinosaurs still roamed to flowers adapting to our changing world today, from tiny floating specks to massive corpse flowers, from deadly poisons to gentle healers. Flowers have accompanied humanity throughout our history. They've fed us, healed us, poisoned us, inspired us, and comforted us. They've marked our most important moments, from births to weddings to funerals. They've appeared in our art, our literature, our religions, and our daily lives, and they've done all of this while serving their own purposes, reproducing, dispersing seeds, and ensuring the next generation. Every flower you see is the result of millions of years of evolution, a finely tuned organism shaped by its environment and its relationships with other species. Every petal, every color, every scent has a reason, even if we don't always understand it. Tomorrow, when you see a flower, perhaps you'll look at it a little differently. You might notice the way a bee investigates each bloom, or wonder about the structure hidden inside those petals, or appreciate that something so beautiful is also so perfectly functional. The natural world is full of such wonders, and I'm grateful to explore them with you. If you've enjoyed this journey into the quiet beauty of flowers, I'd love for you to like this video and subscribe to the channel. There are so many more natural wonders waiting to be discovered, so many more stories to tell. Until next time, sleep well, dream peacefully, and may your world be full of flowers.